Hello and welcome. Today we're going to skip all the usual chatter about clever ads and social media hacks. Instead, we're going to dig into something way more important: how to find the real, most profitable opportunities in any market before you even start thinking about how to sell. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so first things first, let's challenge a really common idea about what actually makes a business successful. When most people hear the word marketing, this is probably what pops into their head. The classic 4 Ps. You make a product, you figure out a price, you find a place to sell it, and then you throw a bunch of money at some flashy promotion.
But what if I told you that's actually the last thing you should be worried about? The real secret isn't about being a genius at selling what you've already made. It's about being smart enough to make what you already know you can sell. That's a total game changer. And this really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. The whole point is to create something with so much value that it just naturally pulls customers in. And, well, that doesn't just happen by luck. It happens because you have a really solid strategy.
So, what does a good strategy even look like? It's really about making clear choices. It's about setting your North Star, knowing exactly where you're trying to go. But here's the kicker: it's just as important to decide what you're not going to do. It's about being smart with your resources, and most importantly, knowing exactly where the profit is.
So, how do we find out where the money is? Well, let's use this fantastic analogy to make it super simple. Imagine you're at a party, and all you want to do is get the biggest possible piece of cake. Before we go to the party, we need to know what we're looking for. In business speak, this is market potential. Don't let the fancy words fool you. All it means is how much total profit is actually up for grabs in one little corner of the market. That's the prize. So, back to our party. Finding the highest market potential simply means finding the cake with the biggest total volume. Not necessarily the widest cake or even the tallest one, but the one that's biggest overall. To figure out that volume, we've got to look at its parts. The first thing is the cake's width, and that's pretty straightforward. It just represents the total number of potential customers in that segment. Now, the second part is the cake's height. This is your profit margin for every single customer. So that's the price they're willing to pay, minus whatever it costs you to make your product. And here's where it gets really interesting. You can't just look at one or the other. A market with millions of people, a super wide cake, is completely worthless if your profit margin is razor thin. That's just a wide, flat pancake. But a tiny niche market, a narrow cake, could be incredibly tall if those few customers are willing to pay a huge premium. The biggest opportunity is always the cake with the most total volume. That's width times height. Okay, so you've done the math, you've measured all the cakes, you've found the one with the biggest volume, you're all set to dive in, right? Not so fast. There's this one huge factor we haven't even mentioned yet, and honestly, ignoring it is probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make. So, what's the catch? Well, the biggest, shiniest, most delicious-looking cake at the party is obviously going to attract a crowd. And that crowd, that's your competition. Here's the reality check. You don't get that whole cake to yourself. No way. You have to share it. Your actual slice is the total size of the cake divided by how many other people are fighting you for it. This leads to a really powerful realization. It might actually be way smarter to go for a slightly smaller cake if nobody else is even looking at it. Think about it. A giant slice of a medium-sized cake is a whole lot better than a tiny crumb from the biggest one. All right, so this whole cake analogy is great, but let's get down to brass tacks. How do you actually get the real numbers for the width, the height, and, of course, the number of rivals? Well, it's not guesswork. There's a clear data-driven process that really just breaks down into 3 main steps. So first, for the price, you use market research to figure out what customers think their perfect product is worth. Second, for the cost, you actually simulate what it would take to build that exact product. This gives you a realistic cost, and, this is key, it stops you from wasting money on features people don't even want. And finally, for competitors, you dive into intelligence reports to see where your rivals are putting their money, which helps you predict who's going to jump in with you. So, you've done it. You've run the numbers, you've sized up the competition, and you've picked your market. But hang on, the job isn't done. There is one final piece to this whole strategic puzzle, and it's absolutely crucial. This right here is maybe the most important long-term idea. Doing all this analysis, it's not a one-and-done thing. Not at all. Markets are alive, they're always changing. What customers think is ideal today could be totally different a year from now.
What this means is that real, long-term success isn't just about picking the right cake today. It's about building a system to constantly keep an eye on how people's tastes are changing so you can see tomorrow's cake before anyone else even knows it exists.
And that leaves us with the final big question. Having a plan for today is a great start, but having a process to find the next great opportunity, well, that's what separates the long-term winners from everyone else. So, how will you make sure you're always looking ahead? Thanks for joining me.